welcome to episode number 7 of the Base Level Podcast. I'm here with Jonathan. Our guest on this episode is Basil Botha. He is a director at Alpha Resources Management, an e-waste recycling company. The episode we just jumped right into it, so we didn't get to do our introduction in the episode. So I hope you guys all enjoy the episode.
Book about 10 years ago about China mining e-waste. It didn't really resonate at that time because I was really focused in the mining business per se hard rock mining. So it was just purely by chance in early 2019 that we stumbled across a business in North Carolina that was trying to get up and running. But, when we looked at the concept of what this person was trying to do, it really resonated in terms of, environmentally extracting the metals which have already been mined, and the cost and the contribution to society thereof. So that really, in a nutshell, is essentially what got us, when I say us, I mean my business partner and I, really interested in this business.
I would have to say the same thing about myself. It was around 2020 that I first kind of learned about what e-waste mining was. I was watching a movie on Netflix I think it was called White Tiger, and it was about India becoming one of the largest economies in the near future. And then I started, doing a little bit more research, and somehow I stumbled upon a couple of YouTube videos explaining how a lot of the e-waste gets sent over to China. It leaves the Seattle area, a lot of the Bay areas. And it was really interesting to, kind of do a deeper dive into what that was. I haven't really been able to find anybody that's doing it on a large scale. I know there's a lot of people on YouTube who post videos, going to, scrap metal locations, and they donate there. But yeah, it's really neat to see, how it's changed over the past couple of years.
Yeah, the funny thing is I think I heard about it first in 2017, but it was at a small scale, right? People taking old laptops, cell phones, taking out the valuable minerals out of it, taking out the batteries, breaking them down, but nothing at a large scale. And it wasn't until Christian kind of brought up the topic of, hey, people are doing this at a large scale, mainly overseas, but we got interested very quickly because imagine what that could do in reducing, the waste that we see, of the tech industry. And then of course the ability to reuse a lot of those materials that are hard to find nowadays, in new technologies. So that's when he mentioned you, and we're like, yeah, we definitely have to get him on and talk a little bit more about what's going on in the space and how you ended up in the space, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. And again, I refer back to the book I read, and it was actually called Junkyard Planet. And it mainly revolved around, waste and how it was processed in China to the extent where it was really detrimental to the environment, the way they went about it. There were no controls, etc. Now, there are some really big refiners of e-waste, one being Umicore and Arubis. They are massive companies. The way they go about it is they take the e-waste, they throw it into a smelter. I'm giving you an abbreviated version of it.
Right.
It goes a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, way too many details.
They put it into a smelter, they burn it, and then they take the metal and they refine it from there. When we looked at this, we didn't particularly want to burn it. We wanted to do it, as I mentioned, in an environmentally friendly way, as well as no discharge. Having been in the mining business and the permitting procedures around mining, it takes about 10 to 15 years to get a mine up and running, whereas in the e-waste business, it's a lot quicker if you go about it in an environmentally friendly way, as we did originally in North Carolina. So no emission and no water, just mechanically process it, throw it through various parts of equipment. Plastic is separated in one end, The metal is taken and separated in another end. Then we take it, we electrowin it, and then we refine the gold, silver, platinum. But we take out the copper in an electrowinning process beforehand. So it took us about 2.5 years just to figure this whole thing out. And now that we've figured it out, I've been to Europe, I've looked at various different parts, different aspects of machinery. So we've come up with the correct machinery to do this in an environmentally friendly way. But it's nothing new. We don't have a black box. There's no black box to this business. It's either you burn it or you run it mechanically. And from economies scale, it's really important to sort of try to get an idea. As an example, before we got into the e-waste recycling business, we had a 80,000 ounce gold producing mine in Finland.
Wow.
The capex for the mine was north of 500 million. The mine took at least 12 years to get into production. It takes...
Why does it take such a long time to get a mine into production? Is it because, I guess, finding the labor? Is it equipment costs? What is that?
Regulation, maybe? Yeah.
Regulation.
You got to drill it. Takes years to drill it. You got to get a study done to make sure that the feasibility of the mine is there. Then you got to raise capital and build it and permit it. Permitting is a nightmare. So it takes an inordinate amount of time. So when we looked at the e-waste business, we looked at comparables. So 80,000 ounces in Finland, 80,000 ounces in North Carolina. The permitting, 3 months, get it permitted. The capital to put it in production is less than 10 million. Wow. And the time frame to get it up and running is less than a year. So those are the comparables. The other ones that you've got to look at, in Finland, we mined 19,000 tons a day to get 6,500 tons of rock to put through the mill at an average grade of 1.5 grams per ton.
And that's how much is pulled from the electronic waste?
No. So the comparables with electronic waste are, you're looking at about 200 grams gold equivalent. When I say 200 grams gold equivalent, that's the gold, silver, palladium, copper, lead, zinc, etc. But it's worked on an equivalent basis. So 200 grams was 1.5 grams. Your value is about 15,000 tons, $15,000 per ton of e-waste, as opposed to sort of $90 per ton of hard rock.
Wow. So not only in the capex, but the time to get it up and the amount you actually make off of this, just e-waste is significantly much more profitable than, traditional mining.
Exactly. So to process or to get 80,000 ounces of gold equivalent per annum compared to Finland, we only have to mine or process 9,000 tons of electronic waste per annum, as opposed to, call it 236, you're looking at well over 300,000 tons of rock per annum. So there's a vast difference in handling as well as people. In Finland, we had 1,200 people. North Carolina, we have about 32 people.
Now, what is the typical, I guess, mine time for, these tons, e-waste tons?
Sorry, I'm not with you, Christian.
How long does it take? Like, what is the process time to be able to extract all of these precious metals?
Okay. The timeline, the plant will run 1.2 tons per hour. So you're looking at about, 24 tons per day.
And
because,
so you,
And do they go 24 hours a day, basically?
yeah, you run 24 hours a day as you do on a mine site as well. So, we can put it up to 2 tons per hour. So it's variable, but you're looking at roughly 24 tons per day of processed electronic waste.
Comparatively to what would a traditional mine, what
Well,
would
the
be
mine,
per hour?
again, the comparative that I can give you in Finland is we would run 6,500 tons of rock per day, 24 hours.
now,
I mean,
where do
it's
you
variable.
collect, this e-waste? Is it from, I know I've seen the bins at Target where you can go and donate your electronic waste. And where do you find, this high amount of tons?
It's a great question. And it brings me to, as of 2019, I don't have recent statistics, but there's about 59 million tons of electronic waste generated annually. And by 2030, it's predicted to be 72 million tons generated annually. It's about 7.3 kilograms per capita worldwide. So it's a massively growing. I mean, how many times do people, for example, change their phones over 1, 2, or 3 years? I mean, I know people like to change it every year when Apple brings out the
And it's about to be the same thing today, right? The iPhone 15 just got announced, and I'm considering it.
Yeah. So the amount of e-waste being generated is a growing, let's put it this way, growing resource. It's not diminishing by any stretch of the imagination. As the population grows, as technology advances, people will continue to use electronic waste. Lies this massive amount, and the statistics show that of that 59 million tons of 2019, only about 36% of that 59 million tons is actually documented that it's recycled.
And a lot of it, I'm assuming, ends up in landfills or just sits in, I guess, warehouses somewhere.
It's sitting in your cupboard. It's sitting in our offices. It's sitting everywhere. But of that, so there's a lot of work to be done from an environmental standpoint to bring that to market so that we can have a circular economy and sustainability and not keep digging holes in the ground to get new metals. So it's
an easy path forward is to show how profitable it can be. I mean, you're talking about your plant that seems to be up and running, pretty sophisticated, only producing about 9,000 tons, or processing 9,000 tons a year. That's nothing in the grand scheme of the 70 something million tons of waste that's coming out. So
yeah,
it's a huge opportunity. Seems like.
Yeah, it is. I'll give you a statistic. In every 1 million recycled cell phones, there is 35,274 pounds of copper, 772 pounds of silver, 75 pounds of gold, and 33 pounds of palladium. And they're currently, as we go back, in the United States alone, 140 million cell phones are thrown into landfills annually.
What was that number again?
140 million.
140 million.
Well, if you take the population of the US, not everybody's got a cell phone because there's very young kids, but they've probably got iPads or something. I mean, everybody's using.
And I feel like the thing is that when you hear the number 140 million, it's just a number to you. But I don't think many people can really imagine 140 million phones. That's such a big number.
Well, just think about it worldwide, and I'll come back to your question because you asked where all this is coming from. For example, Glencore have a smelter in Quebec, Canada. They source electronic waste from 40 different countries.
Now, what is it all mainly Eastern or Western countries that are producing, large amount of electronic waste?
It's generally in Africa tends to be mom and pop shops, eking out a living, extracting the metals. They're not doing it in an environmentally friendly way. But a lot of it is sort of Asia, Europe, North America. It seems to be going every which way. There's no real, is it coming from Europe to North America, or is it coming from North America to Europe? It depends. It's like a commodity, really. Electronic waste is a commodity. We buy the material from wherever we can get it. But certainly North America is one of the richest sources of electronic waste on the planet.
Like most waste, right? I think we're only rivaled by our counterpart of the East and China in most aspects.
They tend to hang on to equipment a lot longer than we do in North America as India. So it's North America, India, China, the biggest producers of electronic waste.
Well, Basil, right? Basil. There we go. I'm going to get it right by the end of this. I think we jumped straight into it. And I mean, this is already super interesting. And there's a lot of numbers here that I'm trying to crank in my head. But,
right.
What is your background? So you have this traditional mining background, but how did you even get started in the space, right? What was 20-year-old you doing that eventually led you into this path?
Well, 20-year-old me was a kid growing up on a gold mine in what was Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe. And, every holidays, I worked on the mine. So it was sort of in the blood. And then I left Rhodesia in 1970 and then worked all over the world, China, South America, Indonesia, North America, Africa. And then, the mining's been in my blood ever since. I mean, that's how it came about. It's very simple.
Yep,
just in your DNA.
Yeah, and besides anything else, and I immigrated to Canada in 1994, and I don't know if you know it, but between Vancouver and Toronto, it's the epicenter of exploration and mining companies in the world. Second to Australia, probably the US. It's not that friendly towards mining. So, I sort of came to the right spot in terms of mining. So ever since I landed here, I've been involved in the mining business. But, I hadn't got out of Finland in 2018. Looking at other businesses, electronic waste mining is way better than traditional mining, I can assure you.
Now, I just have to ask, so we recently just did an episode on asteroid mining, and I know this is a little outside of this topic episode, but what are your thoughts on asteroid mining? Because, it's that huge buzzword of, an asteroid has so many quintillion
trillion dollars.
It's all this astronomical numbers that people say when it comes to mining an asteroid. And there's a lot of startups that have failed trying to do this. So my question is, what are your thoughts on asteroid mining? And do you feel like it will heavily, I guess, dilute the market of precious metals and its value?
It's going to take a while to answer that question, Christian. In early 2000, I came across a company, and I forget the name of it, but they were going to mine the seabed 2 miles down. 2 miles down, because there's all this enriched, and there's these mining is called or gold, copper, etc., is caused by hot fluids coming up and then congregating in a simplified version. So they look at the seabed as a very rich source of minerals, way richer than sort of us sticking holes in the ground on the surface. But the problem is, first of all, the environmentalists are going to get on you're going to face a huge problem environmentally. Although the minerals are down there, and we certainly know they are, there's no question about that. To answer your question, from asteroid mining, I envisioned this. How do we go out there? Do we go out in the spacecraft and lasso that asteroid and bring it in? And it seems so far-fetched. Plausible. Sounds pretty sexy. Maybe sound, from an environmental point of view, it sounds pretty good. I'm not convinced. When they talked about mining the ocean bed, it seemed far-fetched. And mining is a tough business. It's not for the weak or faint of heart. It's for people, with true grit and perseverance, and there are tough people in this business. Running these mining companies is no joke. So looking at asteroids, yeah, I have no doubt they're rich in value. But how do you get them? We've been to the moon once. I'm not sure why we haven't been back there. But harnessing these asteroids seems, but it's beyond me.
It's a hard engineering problem, right? I think people that are trying to mine the seabed probably found the same thing. After a few hundred meters down, you start realizing the amount of pressure that is down there, and the equipment that you need, and the expenses, and what if something goes wrong, right? And of course, there's your environmental concern. And so I have no doubt space mining is in the same position of, you're right. How do we get the machinery up there? How do we bring it back without endangering, the planet, if it's going to be a massive amount of material? Or, is it even worth it if we're just mining small materials going back and forth? Because maybe the cost outweighs the benefit, right? So yeah, I could see the struggles there. Now, of course, I'm very hopeful. I'm an optimist, and I hope it becomes reality, because that'd be so cool, right? Just, oh yeah, we're mining ores off of asteroids or comets. That'd be great, right? But I can see the hill they're going to have to climb. Not even the hill, the mountain, the Mount Everest they'll have to climb to make sure it's a possible, it's a possibility.
Yeah, there is a person in Vancouver, very wealthy mining guy, who's looking at, again, mining the seabed. Apart from this other company that tried it in 2000, whereupon they were going to mine 2 miles down, with electronic, unmanned
Vehicles, right?
Yeah, unmanned vehicles, etc. And they do that funny enough, they do that in Saskatchewan, in uranium mining. It's all robotic. So the mine from surface, it's all robotic. So it can be done. But that is working from the surface to whatever. I don't know the depth that they're working at on solid ground, but 2 miles down, with the pressure, you're not sending people down there. So it does sound great, but a little far-fetched.
And that's always the problem, it seems like, with all these grandiose ideas. It's just a matter of waiting for the technology to catch up. And there's a lot of people that are optimistic of things. And, Jonathan always says, if it's cutting edge, it's been worked on for 20 years. And that's one of my favorite things he said, because it's true. What was that example that you said, Jonathan, about the F-16? When it came out,
the F-22, right? It was revealed and debuted as this high-tech fighter, but it's been in development since like the 60s, right, or the 70s. So a 50-year-old fighter that is the cutting edge today is actually 50 years old. Right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. So and like you mentioned, right? This is not new. Even e-waste mining is not new. It's probably been worked on for years and years and years, but only now are people really realizing the benefit it could have to a circular economy, and that the technology is there to produce, better and more efficient results.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about mining or processing 9,000 tons per annum, there are companies processing in one plant 190,000 tons per annum. We are small fish, comparatively speaking, although our vision is sort of a hub and spoke model, whereby we'll mine it from various parts of the country or world, send the concentrate to one plant, and then refine it from there. So it doesn't stop us from expanding, as it were. But to come back to your point, having spent 40 odd years in the mining business, I've seen a lot of black box technology, and it doesn't work. In fact, there was a company in Vancouver, I won't name names, but they came up with a technology where they would use sort of a solution, throw all the electronic waste in, and then take what the residue was and then process it. And it was patented. But 10 years later, they raised a whole bunch of money and they're gone. Whereas the company that we've got in North Carolina is fairly close to be listed on the New York Stock Exchange.
Now, given that governments are now doing more initiatives to have electronic waste cycling, and there's a little bit more attention on this, do you think that the general public will get behind this and you'll see a lot more companies popping up? I know just recently, like on TikTok, I've seen a couple, influencers that have been making videos of them going around and collecting motherboards, and this is how you extract the gold. Do you think it'll catch on eventually?
I do. Nothing's precluding anybody from going into the business. A lot of the financiers that we speak to, and they say, well, who's your competition? Well, the competition is only sucking up 36% of all the electronic waste worldwide. There's still a vast amount out there that is still available. Will the public get educated? I believe they will. And as initiatives come into place, and there's, how can I say, for example, if you change your battery in your car, there's an environmental fee. So when you buy a computer, is there an environmental fee? Or if you buy a cell phone, is there an environmental fee? Because once there's some value attached to it. So it's not going to sit in your closet. People are going to say, oh, I've got that phone. It's worth $50. If I turn it back in, I got $50. So there's got to be some sort of incentives to bring awareness to people to recycle. It's like your paint tins, your batteries, your tires. When you change your tires, you've got to pay another fee, environmental fee.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I think economic sense is always an easy way to get people to adopt it, right? Like, if, when I hear that AT&T, for example, is doing a promotion where if I turn in my iPhone, I get X off the new iPhone, then of course I'm going to turn my new iPhone in, right? And they can do what they like with it. And that reduces my waste output and hopefully helps them reduce their waste output because then they can recycle the material. So I think that'd be a brilliant idea. People can really figure out how to weigh those incentives to get people more interested. Because, and one thing I'm curious is, we hear often about how, dangerous, toxic, and, damaging traditional mining can be of these rare earth metals. Do you think there'll be a point in time where e-waste mining could replace the production that we see from those traditional mines?
I can tell you, China is the epicenter of rare earth element, and I've been there. It's a place called Botha in Inner Mongolia, and it's pretty much like a bit of a lunar landscape. It's very, very toxic. The great thing about electronic waste and your phone, computer, there are rare earth elements used in them. So those are recoverable. To what extent that will replace new demand, I don't know. But certainly, apart from the gold, silver, palladium, copper, lead, zinc, tin, steel, there are about 30 other metals in very small concentrations, like cobalt, nickel, rare earth elements. The list goes on and on and on. Lithium. So there are multiple metals and extremely valuable. So I only read you sort of the highlights of what is easy to get out of the metals in the first instance, but all metals are recovered eventually out of electronic waste.
Now, outside of the environmental aspect, do you think this is kind of a solution for geopolitical tensions when it comes to resource extraction and availability?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but, as I said, China probably supplies 90 to 95% of rare earth elements in the world. They're also the biggest lithium producer in the world. So they shut off supply. They can squeeze the world. No question about that.
Which becomes a national security concern, right?
Yeah. As Russia is, one of the biggest producers of platinum group metals in the world. I mean, if they shut it off, and, just look at what Europe's going through now with natural gas and, oil out of Russia. So with these elements, people can certainly deal with one another. When I say deal, I mean not in a good way. If you don't give me this, I'm not going to give you that.
I mean, so we see a lot of the oil tycoons in the Middle East too, right? Whenever they need a piece of leverage, they pull out the production of oil barrels. Like, oh, well, maybe we'll just reduce how much oil we produce or we export, right?
Now, what are some of the social considerations social and ethical considerations that you have to consider when it comes to electronic waste mining? When it comes to mining, I know a lot of people are upset that there might be, I guess, labor laws that are violated. Do you think e-waste mining is having a hard time pronouncing that word, susceptible to that?
From our standpoint, ESG or, the governance surrounding processing e-waste is something we focused on right from the beginning. We could have gone to pyrolysis, simple words, it's burning the metal, getting into the plastic. You've got emissions. We wanted to do it, as I mentioned earlier on, in an environmentally friendly way. So our process being extremely clean from a processing point of view is sort of the first step in governance, worker protection, environmental protection, and also there are regulations in North America. It's called R2, 3, that unless you're certified, very few people will sell you electronic waste for you to process because they don't know where it's going. So if you have the certification, it's governed in the first instance by scrap dealers, because there's lots of people running around collecting scrap because that's their business. They disassembled everything, sell some stuff, send other stuff to us, somebody else, and they look for that certification, and they in turn are certified as well. Similarly with batteries, a lot of people won't ship batteries to people because there's a lot of good metals in batteries as well, but they've got to be recycled in a environmentally friendly fashion. So yeah, big time. So the certification is a way to govern it. Is it enough? I don't believe it is right now. I believe that North America, and through Canada in that, should be more, and I'm against regulation per se, but regulation for the environment is a good thing. So as long as the syndicates of recyclers buy into regulation to regulate themselves, the better. And I think regulation comes from within.
Do you feel like there is at least a decent governing body, or I think a lot of them, they're called non-GOs, right? Non-governed organizations that are coming up with these regulations that seem to be fair and actually effective?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's operating procedures. I mean, from an equipment point of view, from a laboratory point of view, ISO 9000, ISO 9005, there's various, but again, it evolves. You can't just slam the regulation. It's like, telling Joe Public, when you finish with that cell phone, you don't put it in your cupboard, you take it to a recycler. It is my freedom.
It's my freedom to leave it in my cupboard, right?
It's what comes from, the way you want to do business, really. And do you want to do it in a correct way or not? And if you don't want to do it in a correct way, then you're not going to go to certification, as it were.
So, we've talked a little bit about, the North America being the largest producer of e-waste. Are we, or is North America in general the largest producer of e-waste recycling, or are we still seeing that more abroad than here in, the Western Hemisphere?
Good point, Jonathan. North America's just beginning to wake up. As I mentioned, the big recyclers are in Finland, Japan, Belgium, Germany, Italy. They are now coming to North America to set up facilities to suck up the e-waste out of North America. The North Americans have been very slow on this, and I raise a point. I used to go skiing in Austria in the late 80s and early 90s, and I was blown away by the way they went about traditionally recycling their garbage, tins, bottles, paper, newspaper. And I came to Canada. That was you had one bin and you threw everything in one bin. That just
That's the U.S. or that's most places in the U.S. too, right?
that just blew my mind. So the Europeans and Japan are way ahead of us, way ahead of us.
And it seems to be countries that are a little bit more aware or conscious of the effects that, climate change or, environmental impacts will have on their, way of life. Where it seems like here in the US, maybe in Canada, Mexico, we're still kind of waking up to the idea of like, oh, life may not be the exact same in the next 30 years if we don't change.
Yeah, I mean, like, as Americans, we kind of live in a bubble, right?
Yeah. It's funny, back in sort of, call it 2000, my daughter got married to a Mexican, and he was blown away because, he'd recently come to Canada, and he said, why do people leave their dishwashers, stoves, and washing machines on the sidewalk? I said, well, they want to throw them away. So he says, well, in Mexico, we fix these things. And as the sideline, I mean, you just go collect all this stuff, fix it, and sell it. It was free.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan and I were from El Paso, and that borders Mexico. And, I see so many businesses in El Paso where they ask for broken washers or, dishwashers, and they fix it and they resell it to somebody who needs it.
Yeah. What?
It's a big business to take like American junk cars, fix them up, and then go sell them in Mexico because the regulations are slightly different than here in the United States. And in most cases, they're still good cars, right? They're same thing with a broken microwave. You just fix a couple pieces and you put it out. But one thing that's interesting, this is kind of a tangent, but I've realized, we in the US and probably in Canada have this idea that it's probably cheaper to replace the equipment rather than actually fix it, right? I think one time I had a TV that some of the LEDs went out, and I looked at cost to replace that, and it was extremely more expensive than just going and buying a new TV, right? I think it was like a $400 repair cost, and a new TV would have cost me $150 at Walmart, right? So I think we have this bad tendency of making some of these, items commodities, like you said, where they're so easy to replace, but not understanding the impact that we're causing or we have by just putting them out on the street or putting them in a landfill.
You're right, Jonathan. And, is that mindset going to change? As an example, I mean, anything that broke in my household, be it a mixer, TV, I used to take it to my son-in-law and he used to fix it. Because I think the reason why this has taken place is, you take your DVD to a fellow who's got a shop, etc., and he says, no, this is going to cost more to repair than it is going to, just buy a new one. And then he'll probably fix it and sell that one because he's got it for free because you don't need it anymore. It's a question of labor. And, a couple of years ago, I saw some statistics on all the countries listed in terms of trash. And actually Canada is number one on the list.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're the biggest hogs of electricity as well. And probably Japan's the best. So, yeah, we're a wasteful lot. But therein lies the opportunity.
Fast fashion is what they call it. We're the biggest, as Americans, we're the biggest consumers of fast fashion, and you just see everything just discarded, from one day to the next, and you end up with these piles of clothing, and that it's really comparable, I guess, to electronic waste, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I've got an associate at the gym I go to, and he recycles jeans. Yeah, he recycles jeans. They send it to India. They, mix it all up and make new jeans. So it's starting to happen. I mean, there's no question. And he's a very successful guy doing it as well. So I think this opportunity, not only electronic waste, but goes far deeper to obviously batteries, and I just think we got to get with the program. That's all. When I say we, I think the general populace.
Yeah, I think we've gotten so used to this idea, not only fast fashion, but just fast everything, right? We tend to value our own labor more than what we're putting out in our consumption and our waste, right? Like, I don't want to cook today, so you know what? I'm gonna go pick up fast food, and with that fast food, I'm gonna have this paper bag and this plastic, and I'm just gonna throw away in the trash, right? And they're increasing pollution because they have to ship this food, and they have those brick and mortar buildings that they have waste and so on, right? Or you know what, I don't want to fix my TV. I'm just going to go buy another one. Or, I'm not going to take public transportation. It takes too long. I'm just going to take my car, right? So we have this fast lifestyle of valuing our own time more than the effects we're having on a greater order. So, yeah, I think we do have to just wake up a little bit and realize, hey, maybe my time is not that valuable, and I should maybe save the earth a little bit by reusing these jeans or reusing that TV or something of the sort.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, I would agree. I've had the same car for the past 7 years, and I could go and buy a new car if I wanted to, but it's just being frugal, and I'd much rather spend my money elsewhere on I guess experiences or myself, the electronics. But yeah, I agree with you. Or people are my age are very frugal, and there's a lot of people my age that like to spend their money.
Yeah, and I think it is a question of economics now that we've seen the global macro kind of take a shift, right? People are waking up to the idea of like, oh, maybe I can downsize, or I should get a cheaper car, or I should, because it's getting expensive, right? And people are realizing how hard it is to keep up. But that also has to do with, is your city walkable? Does it have public transportation? So like, I live in Houston, Texas. If you know anything about Houston, Texas, it is the complete, antithesis to a walkable city, right? So you have to have a car. Luckily, I made a choice to get a Tesla. Now, whatever you feel about Elon Musk and his operations, but I feel like I made some impact there in reducing some of my waste. But yeah, it is hard. But I am seeing that shift in my little brother's generation, or even just a few years younger than me, right? I wish more generations had that mindset. As long as your heart's in the right place, it's okay. I wish that was a more common phrase. Yeah.
It'll take some time to get there. Now, we always ask our guests this question, no matter what industry they're in. What emerging technologies are you looking at outside of e-waste mining?
I believe the next big thing is going to be batteries. Now, that said and done, there's some rather large battery companies out of Canada that have raised enormous amounts of money, set up shop down in Texas as well, Li-Cycle being one of them. I do believe that we are in the early days of battery recycling. How long have electric cars been around? 10 years. How long have power tools been around? Battery power tools. It'll be 20 years, but when you look at volumes, you've got to look at the car, because the cars takes an enormous amount of batteries. So I do believe, based on the number of metals that go into batteries, that is going to be the next big thing. But I do believe that the companies that have gone into it now, there are not sufficient amounts of batteries coming up for recycling compared to electronic waste, as an example. That's just my personal opinion. And I think it's based on some statistics that we looked at, because we did look at battery recycling right at the beginning. And there's just, because supply, if you got a market capitalization of $2.8 billion, and in the first quarter of the year, you've only turned over $2.7 million in gross, there's something wrong with the picture. So supply, and that's the first thing we looked at with electronic waste recycling. How much of this stuff's around, and where is it going? Can we get our hands on it? And yes, we can. Whereas with batteries, very difficult to get your hands on it. And if it's difficult to get your hands on it, it's going to be expensive.
Why is it so difficult to get your hands on? Is it just people are, ship them, outside the country, or are they just dumping them, not recycling them?
Well, there's just not enough of it going around. 10 years ago, for example, my girlfriend had a Leaf, and she started losing charging power, but she sold it to somebody who didn't mind, because they didn't care about range anxiety. So those cars are really not coming back to the market that readily. Some of them are going to get crashed, and then the batteries, come for recycling. But
a small percentage, right?
The momentum is just not there.
And then you have Tesla promising that their cars can last 500,000, 1,000,000 miles. That's going to take, if it's true, if that's not just more marketing, that, it's going to take a long time for that cycle to come back, right? Not worth it.
Not enough of it, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I'm always curious to see, where batteries are going. I know, because one of the issues is, the lack of cobalt production. And of course, for the U.S.'s sake, or North America's sake, right? The fact that, China's buying up a lot of land and rights to, large cobalt reservoirs, or whatever they're called. And so it is a national security concern. It's a concern in general for just general production. So I always like to see what other battery technologies are coming out, and, what they're producing, how long they last, what's their efficiency. And I think it's a unique space to keep an eye on. Yeah, I hear. Yeah, there's some ethical concerns there. It's almost as blood. Yeah, I heard it's actually even worse than the blood diamond situation, back in the 20th century. But yeah, well, we can probably get in a whole different podcast on that. But I do have a question, though. It's kind of tied into the labor, and of course, the ethical side of labor. So you mentioned your e-waste facility in North Carolina only has 32 employees. compared to your traditional mine that had, I forget the number, but something thousand employees, 1,200. Wow. Okay, so why such a drastic reduction in the need for for power, people power? Is a lot of the process automated? It's just a lot of machinery being used that single people can operate themselves, or what's the case there?
Example, one shift on the grinding process, as it were, takes 3 people, with one helper on the front end, another helper, so it's 5 people on a shift. And then from a electrowinning refining point of view, you've got 3 people. Laboratory, you've got 1.5 people, depending. So it's less moving parts. I mean, on a mine, you've got trucks, graders, dozers, blasting people, supervised. I mean, the list just
Someone to
you got
to here in Yep.
foreign people. Yeah, you've got, it's just a marathon of people. So
processes are definitely simplified,
very much
right?
so. Very much so. But like I say, Christian, it's nothing new. I keep say to people, what we've applied to our processing is what I've learned from 40 years in the mining business. Nothing new, no black box, nothing. If you want to, people say, well, what's your IP? Well, there's no IP. It's knowledgeable IP. That's about it.
Experience I mean, essentially, I guess you've done it all, right? You've
That's right.
in the time.
It's
Right.
and you try to run a business on, this protecting this black box. You spend more time, protecting it and patents than getting on with the actual business. As people say, what about your competition? Well, look at the statistics. 36% of all e-waste is only documented being recycled. Where's the rest going? There's a ton of it around.
Yeah, huge market opportunity there.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why Arubis from, Arubis from Germany are opening 190,000 ton a year plant in Georgia.
Interesting.
Yeah. Nothing's stopping it. I mean, competition is good.
Yeah, absolutely. We always hear the word co-opetition. Competition drives progress.
Certainly does. It makes you smarter. I mean, look at the example of BlackBerry. BlackBerry was a Canadian powerhouse. I had one. I don't know if you remember BlackBerry, but everybody had.
I didn't have one. I was too young. My aunt had one. I think my first phone was a knockoff BlackBerry, but I knew they were great phones.
BlackBerry, I had a Palm Pilot before that. I mean, which is American design, and then Canadians, invented the BlackBerry, and that was fantastic phone. But then all of a sudden, Apple came along, and were marketing their phone, and they started putting apps and all sorts of other fancy things. What did BlackBerry say? Oh, we don't need that stuff. There's not a market for it. Where are they today?
Famous last words.
Yeah. So competition makes you smarter. And unless you pay attention, you're going to get eaten.
So I guess that leads to my question. So with that 190,000 ton plant opening not too far away from your plant, how do you all plan to scale? Are there any plans in the near future? Yeah, of course, there's the buzzword of automation and AI. Do you guys plan to use any of that?
Well, our model is, 9,000 ton plant, and then hub and spoke, where we situate, for example, collection facility up in either Oregon or Washington, collect all the e-waste there, concentrate it, and ship it for refining to North Carolina. Or in Europe, secure e-waste there, concentrate it, ship it to North Carolina. That's the way to go. And I mean, the battery people are talking about that as well. Same thing. They have the hub and spoke model. So it's a very successful model. So we intend to expand, but will we ever get to 190,000 tons a year? I doubt it. But we'll certainly get to 40 or 50,000 tons.
Makes sense. Well, we'll be looking forward to that.
Now, Basil, we're coming up on the hour, and I just want to ask, do you have any final thoughts or any social media that you would like to share?
No, I don't really. I just have one recommendation. The book, Junkyard Planet.
Junkyard
A
Planet.
great book to read. It gives you a real insight into recycling and how certain countries go about it and how certain countries don't go about it. But it's worth the read, Junkyard Planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to check it out and even link it in, this episode.
Yeah, it would be well worthwhile if people really want to dig into how not to do e-waste recycling.
And let's say someone wants to get involved, right? Is there a way for them to reach out to you, maybe via LinkedIn or a website of some sort? Or, one thing we hope for this podcast eventually, once we can grow the audience, is for potential investors that want to invest in something that's a little edge case to get involved. What's the path you think they should take?
Yeah, I mean, if they reach out to me personally, by my LinkedIn, I'd be happy to respond as you reached out. Be happy to respond.
Well, thank you. We certainly have a lot more research to do, and it was great having you on. This was a fun episode. And like I said, I've been interested in this since 2020, and there's so many rabbit holes to go down. But yeah, we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Christian and Jonathan. It's been a pleasure to meet and speak with you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And if I don't know, I'll let you know.